All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. A heavy hitter, but so relevant for us as coaches.
It really is. I mean, it can completely change how you see things, both personally and in your work as a coach. And coming from Frankl's experiences in the Nazi camps, that just adds a whole other level of impact.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a light beach read, is it? The book is in two parts. First, you've got Frankl taking us through his time in Auschwitz, the raw reality of it, the psychological impact, no holding back.
Right. And then in the second part, he gets into logotherapy, his whole theory about finding meaning, which is crazy when you think about it, that this idea was born out of his experience in the camps.
It's like finding hope in the darkest place imaginable.
Exactly. And that's what's so powerful about it. This isn't just some theory cooked up in a classroom. Frankl was a psychiatrist witnessing firsthand how people coped with unimaginable suffering. He saw who gave up, who found a way to keep going, and what separated them.
Which is a question we grapple with as coaches too, right? Seeing clients in their struggles, trying to help them find their way.
All the time. And the preface of the book just hits you right between the eyes. Frankl talks about asking his patients, why do you not commit suicide? He's getting at something so profound, don't you think?
It's like, what keeps us going? Even when we've lost everything, there's still this spark in us.
Yeah. And for him, after seeing the concentration camps, that question wasn't theoretical at all. It was about survival.
Which makes me think about clients who come to us feeling like they've hit rock bottom, like they've lost everything. And Frankl's asking, even then, there's got to be something that keeps us holding on.
There is, and that's where the first part of the book really gets you. Frankl describing arriving at Auschwitz, the selection process, having literally everything taken away, the shock of becoming just another number in a system designed to dehumanize. It's terrifying just to imagine it. And obviously, as coaches, we might not see that level of trauma in our clients. But you can see echoes of it, that feeling of being stripped bare, of losing your identity, your sense of self.
Oh, absolutely. And Frankl noticed that even in Auschwitz, even in that horrific environment, there was a pattern to how prisoners coped psychologically. He breaks it down into 3 phases.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the first phase?
Well, the first is shock and denial. You know, like those clients who are still in that this can't be happening stage, clinging to any little shred of hope.
I can see that. So how does that play out in Auschwitz?
Frankl gives an example of prisoners trading valuables for a few days' worth of food, almost as if they thought they'd be going back home soon.
Wow. So they were living in this kind of temporary reality, unable to grasp the true horror of their situation.
It's like a coping mechanism, right? And it makes me think of clients who've just lost their job, and they're still operating like it's just a temporary setback, not a major life change.
So denial buys them time. But what happens when that wears off? Well, that's when phase 2 sets in. Apathy. It's like this emotional numbness takes over. There's this one story that really stuck with me. Frankl describes a corpse being dragged through the typhus hut, and the other prisoners barely even react. They've just shut down emotionally to survive.
That is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And I can see how it applies to clients who've been through really tough times, like a divorce or a business failure. You can see that apathy as a protection mechanism, but it also prevents them from truly moving forward.
That's it, exactly. And that leads us to the third phase, which is where things start to get really interesting. It's still this state of depersonalization. But here's where Frankl saw some prisoners starting to find glimmers of meaning in tiny acts of resistance or moments of joy, however small.
So even in Auschwitz, they were finding ways to reclaim some of their humanity, their sense of self.
In a way, yeah. They found humor in dark situations. They found solace in sharing stories, in holding on to memories. Frankl talks about finding comfort just thinking about his wife.
It's like even in that hell, their spirits were still trying to find a way out.
Right. And it makes me think about how we as coaches can help our clients find those glimmers of hope, those tiny sparks of meaning that can turn into something much bigger.
Because those sparks are what keeps us going.
Right.
It's not just willpower. It's about having a reason to keep fighting.
That's the core of it, I think. And it's what leads us to the second part of the book and Frankl's theory of logotherapy. He realized that the people who survived weren't always the physically strongest. It was often the ones who held on to a why, a purpose that kept them alive.
So it wasn't just about surviving physically, but about finding something to survive for.
Exactly. And that's what's so powerful about logotherapy. Frankl argues that our will to meaning is as strong as our will to survive, maybe even stronger.
So we've got this foundation of Frankl's experiences in the camps. I mean, talk about seeing the worst of humanity. But then he builds this whole theory of meaning making on top of it. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. Logotherapy. So for those of us who haven't read the book yet, what is it in a nutshell?
Yeah, give us the elevator pitch.
Okay, so think of it this way. Logotherapy isn't about giving people meaning. It's more like helping them discover it.
Ooh, I like that. Helping them discover it.
Right. And that's where the connection to coaching is so strong, I think. You're not telling someone what their path should be. You're guiding them to figure out their own.
That totally resonates with my coaching style.
Yeah.
Empowering clients to find their own answers, their own North Star, or whatever you want to call it.
Love it. And Frankl would probably call it tacking into that will to meaning, which he argues is just as fundamental as our will to survive, maybe even more so.
Okay, so let's get practical for a minute. If I'm sitting with a client, how do I actually help them activate that will to meaning? Where do we even begin?
Well, first you have to recognize that it's there, even if it's buried under all sorts of stuff. Doubt, fear, feeling overwhelmed, you name it.
Right, all the things that bring people to coaching in the first place.
Exactly. And Frankl talks about something called existential frustration, which might sound bad, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, tell me more about that. Existential frustration. What is it exactly?
It's that tension that comes from grappling with the big questions, like what's my purpose? Why am I here? Searching for that meaning.
And we see that all the time as coaches, right?
Yeah.
People feeling stuck, unfulfilled, even if they seem to have it all together on the surface.
All the time. And logotherapy gives us a new way to think about that frustration. It's not a sign that something's wrong. It's actually the starting point for growth.
Interesting. So it's like they're already on the path, they just don't realize it yet.
That's a great way to put it. It's like the client saying, hey, there's got to be more to life than this.
And our job as coaches is to help them go from got to be more to actually finding it. So what are some of the tools logotherapy offers for that? How can we help clients bridge that gap?
Frankl talks about a couple of techniques that I think are super relevant for coaches. Paradoxical intention and dereflection.
Those sound a little academic. Can you break them down for me?
Sure. So paradoxical intention. Let's say your client is terrified of failing at their new business.
Yeah. Classic fear. We've all been there.
Right. So instead of trying to calm them down or reassure them, you might actually encourage them to wish for that failure, to really imagine the worst case scenario.
Hold on. Are you serious? Tell them to lean into the thing they're most afraid of.
I know, right? It sounds counterintuitive, but that's the paradoxical part. By fully embracing the fear, you kind of disarm it.
It's like you're calling it bluff.
Exactly. It's like saying, okay, worst case, it all blows up. Then what? And sometimes just that willingness to face the fear head on can take away its power.
I can see how that would be so helpful for clients who get stuck in that analysis paralysis mode, overthinking every single decision.
Totally. It's like giving them permission to screw up, to let go of needing to control the outcome.
And then dereflection. What's that about?
Dereflection is all about shifting the focus outward. So instead of your client dwelling on their own worries and insecurities, you encourage them to focus on something bigger than themselves.
Okay, I'm getting this. I've got a client who's super self-critical, always comparing themselves to other coaches. With dereflection, would I encourage them to maybe volunteer their skills or get involved in a cause they care about?
Boom. You got it. It's about connecting them to something meaningful outside of their own heads.
So it's about expanding their world, not shrinking it down to just their inner critic.
Exactly. And both of these techniques, paradoxical intention and dereflection, they're not about fixing the client. They're about helping them access their own inner resources, their own capacity to find meaning.
Which for coaches is amazing, right? We're
Yeah.
all about empowerment, not providing all the answers. Logotherapy seems to fit so perfectly with that. But it also acknowledges that life can be tough, that suffering is just part of being human.
Yeah, no sugarcoating there. And that's where Frankl's concept of tragic optimism comes in. He doesn't try to pretend that suffering doesn't exist. He says we can still choose our attitude. Even in the face of tragedy, we can find meaning in it.
And it's so powerful that he's not saying this from some ivory tower, right? He lived through the horrors of the camps. He knows what he's talking about.
Exactly, and that's what makes Man's Search for Meaning so powerful for coaches, I think. It's not about giving clients easy answers. It's about helping them tap into that inner strength, that ability to choose how they respond, even when things are really, really tough.
Such a good reminder for us too, right?
Yeah.
As coaches. We need that resilience
Yeah.
just as much as our clients do.
No doubt.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the everyday stuff of coaching, the marketing, the client calls, all of it. But Frankl's book really pulls you back, reminds you of the bigger picture, the why behind it all.
Yeah. He's like, hey, coaches, don't forget about the human side of all this. We're not just, selling a service. We're helping people through some of the toughest stuff life throws at them, helping them find their way.
And honestly, that means we need to find our meaning in this work too, right?
Yeah.
Because burnout is real. We question our impact just like anyone else.
Oh, for sure. We're not immune to that. And Frankl actually has something to say about that, too. He talks about the meaning of suffering. And it's not about, seeking out pain, but about finding purpose within it, even when things are hard.
Which is such a powerful message coming from him, right? After everything he went through, he's not just talking the talk, he lived it.
Right. And it makes me think, even when we hit those inevitable rough patches in our coaching practice, there's opportunity there to learn, to grow.
So when clients ghost us or our marketing totally flops, we can actually find meaning in those moments. I'm curious how that works.
Well, think about those 3 phases Frankl observed in the camps. It's like we go through them as coaches, too. You have that initial excitement, the honeymoon phase, when everything feels brand new and full of possibility.
Oh, yeah. I remember that feeling, like I was going to change the world one client at a time.
Exactly. And then reality sets in, right? And that's phase 2. The apathy. You hit a plateau, start feeling disillusioned, wondering if you're actually making a difference.
Oof, I've been there. And it's not a fun place to be.
It's not. But that's when phase 3 comes in. And that's where Frankl's work is so powerful. It's about finding those small acts of resistance, those glimmers of meaning that remind you why you started doing this in the first place.
Okay, I love that. Small acts of resistance. Give me a concrete example. What might that look like?
Well, let's say you're totally burnt out from the constant hustle of getting clients. Instead of giving up, you could try that principle of de-reflection. Shift your focus to something outside yourself, like mentoring a new coach, sharing your expertise.
Oh, I like that. Take the focus off my own struggles and help someone else out.
Exactly. Or maybe you're dealing with major imposter syndrome, that feeling like you're not good enough. Well, that's where paradoxical intention could be really powerful. Just embrace the fear. Tell yourself, okay, I'm the worst coach ever. What happens now?
It's like you're daring the universe to prove you wrong. I love it.
Right. So you see, even though Frankl's work comes from such a dark place, it's ultimately a message of hope.
It really is. It's a reminder that we have more power than we think, even when things are tough.
And that's something we can share with our clients, too.
This has been an incredible deep dive. Man's Search for Meaning is so much more than just another self-help book. It's a guide for living a life of purpose. And I think for coaches, that message is more relevant than ever.
Couldn't agree more. Frankl's ideas are timeless, and they give us a framework for not just surviving, but thriving, both in our own coaching journeys and in the lives of our clients.
I love that. Thriving, not just surviving. So to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this. What small act of resistance can you take today to bring back that spark? How can you bring more meaning to your work and to the lives of your clients? Think about it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.